Hello, everyone. Hope you all are well. Welcome. I am Jackie, and I am forever faithful. I hope everyone enjoyed their day off with family and friends. And if not, I just hope you enjoyed the day. So, I've been in communication with my spiritual team, and I was kind of just like asking them, like, what is it that you want me to do, share, etc. And I was brought to the very first time I had my first initial supernatural experiences. See, I grew up in a haunted house. We moved to this house when I was around 5 years old because I wasn't even in school. Um, of course, at the time I didn't know it was haunted. I don't think I don't think even the adults were aware what was going on for many decades, actually, um, because they just weren't sensitive. They just were not sensitive enough to feel the shifts of energy in the house. So I remember first going to the house and walking up the front stairs to the front door, and others had already went in. Others were, walking the land, and I just remember standing in front of um, the front door, and it was dark in the house, but it was a hallway. When you open the front door, you're in the hallway, so you can, you know, go to your left or go to your right. But I stood there because I felt an energy. I felt something was there, even though I could not see it with my physical eyes. I knew something was there, and this was me at 5 years old. And I stood there, what seemed like at least a minute. But as I'm standing there, I could feel the energy of this being, this entity. And I just knew that it was not nice and it didn't want me there. And I picked up that it was like an older white male, older Caucasian male. The energy was male, right? So I I stopped standing there staring into the down the dark hallway because um, I just felt like it really didn't want me there. So I went inside um, the house with everyone else. But, and this is the thing, this house was one of a kind. It was made out of granite, the stone, granite, the entire house. Um, and I've done research on granite, how it's supposed to balance the emotions. It's great for protection. Um, just a lot of positive things. And when I did my research on the metaphysical properties of granite, I'm thinking, okay, so even though it's supposed to balance emotions, even though it's supposed to bring abundance and prosperity, I was like, I didn't experienced any of that in that house. So it had me thinking, well, if we are living in a granite house and it has all these positive properties to it, so did it truly have an effect on the household? meaning that if it was not granted, would it have been much worse than it was? But I guess I'll never know, right? So it was just something, a question, something I was pondering, right? But living in this house with a large family, I was one of the youngest in the household. But I constantly felt shifts of energy. And I obviously couldn't explain it at 5 or 6, or, I couldn't explain it. I just knew that there was something there that I could not see. And it was certain places in the house that I felt this shift of energy the strongest. It was the front door hallway, the back porch. There was a storage closet or room underneath the stairway, um, the back porch, and the kitchen, especially at nighttime. Now, I had a younger sibling, and who would often ask me to go with her in the kitchen if it was dark. She was like, I don't want to go by myself. So I would be brave and go with her. But then there were times when I was too afraid to go into certain parts of the house because the energy was so, it felt bad. It felt bad. So I would ask one of my older siblings to go with me to a certain part of the house. But while I was there, I experienced things that no one else in the household experienced. And and of course I'm getting older, I'm in school and all of that. But some things that happen, a lot of things happen in this house, but a few things that I dealt with, that no one else dealt with, was sleep paralysis, often, very often. I also found myself being pushed out of my bed often, to the point where my mother's like, you need to get off the top bunk and get on the bottom bunk, right? And I never fell out the bed again. But I was constantly being pushed out the bed, and I would wake up on hard wood floors, not understanding what happened. So my mother's like, okay, I'm moving you to the bottom bunk. I said, okay. So it stopped. And then I started to sleepwalk. So there was a phase where I was just sleepwalking. And luckily, there were times my grandmother, or my mother, usually my mother, would catch me walking out the door or unlocking the door, the front door. And see what happened, what I realize now is that these dark energies that was in that house obviously knew more about me than I knew about myself. Obviously, I was a kid. But the sleep paralysis was a spiritual attack. The sleepwalking is basically them possessing my body in a vulnerable state to get me outside, basically to cause harm to me. Also, I remember there were times when, well, I used to astral travel a lot, not on purpose. I just did it naturally, and oftentimes I would wake up and paralyzed. Not all the time, but a lot of times I would. Also, things that were happening to me as a young girl. You have no Well, I had no experience whatsoever. Didn't know what sex was. I didn't know. I'm a kid. I'm living pretty much a kid's life, right? Playing with toys, playing outside, riding the bike. But I remember there was a moment in my life where even I, as a child, didn't understand it, why I was doing certain things to myself. And I had no knowledge whatsoever, really, about my body and certain parts of my body. And but I found myself doing things, and then I remember I would get really nauseous and sick afterwards. And I didn't understand why I was doing it, why it was happening, and why I was sick, nauseous afterwards. But that's because these entities were, in that particular experience, more of a sexual experience. They were feeding off of that energy. Even though I didn't know what I was doing, but they had, it's like I was being influenced in a way that I didn't know or understand. I didn't know. So I was like, okay. And then, then that phase ended, right? Because I just didn't like how I felt afterwards. Um, Again, no one else in the house would have these experiences except for me. And I didn't understand why I was the one having these experiences. And I remember my grandmother saying to me one point, like, you know, the witches are riding you. And I'm like, the witches? She was like, you must have done something. If they're basically riding you, they're attacking you. I'm like, I haven't done anything. I'm a good kid. I knew that. Um, but regardless of how much I tried to be an even better kid, I was still being attacked. I was still having sleep paralysis. Um, I was still going through a lot of that. I also noticed that when the adults would get in heated arguments and become angry, that their faces would change and shift. And I had seen it so many times, but I didn't understand it then. I didn't understand it then. But everything came together when I saw the movie Fallen when it came out with Denzel Washington. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I saw growing up. And what would happen is that these dark entities would basically attach themselves and influence the adults. And a lot of times it would be heated arguments or disagreements, and they would go from angry to rage. And when they get to that point of no longer angry, but just pure rage, like the face, their faces would start to change and twist and contort, where it didn't really look like them anymore. And again, I didn't know what it was, but I knew something. I knew something invisible was in that house. I didn't know what it was, who it was, why it was there, what it was doing. I didn't know, but I knew something was there. I didn't have a name, I didn't have a word for it. No, I just didn't know. But I just knew instinctively that there was something bad in this house. I didn't understand how it worked, even though I was seeing things happening and I personally was experiencing it. But as a child, could not connect those dots together. And I lived in this house from the age of 5 till I think I was 15 or 16 years old. So a lot happened there. But initially, that's how I guess, initiated into the um, into the spiritual realm, because at 5 I was already sensing things. And even growing up in that house, I knew, even though I wasn't physically there, but if I, let's say I was at school and I came home, I could sense the heaviness in the house. Like there had been some type of altercation that had happened before I arrived. I knew when people were lying. I knew when people were telling half truths, meaning they only wanted you to know a little bit and keeping the rest secret. I could sense people's intentions, if it was positive or negative. Um, I just knew things without ever really knowing or having any proof of things. And yes, a couple of times I did tell those that are older than me that there was something in the house. I feel like there's, something in the house that I can't see. Like there's a man there, in the hallway. But like a lot of adults too, they just think it's the imagination or imaginary friend of the child. But I was actually sensing something in that house. And it was. And that house was built sometime in the 1800s. Um, it was um, it was a house uh, where some of the soldiers um, stayed during the war. Um, yeah, so it was already like over 100 years old, 150 some years old by the time we had already moved in. And um, yeah, so that was the house I grew up in. That was one of two haunted houses that I grew up in. Um, so this house was made out of granite. It was definitely haunted, and I experienced things that no one else had experienced in my family. I was the one who was going through it. And then it's like when I had my true awakening by the age of 10, when I knew that this was not my home, this was not my family, and that I was sent here but didn't understand why I was sent here. That is when I began to have even more sleep paralysis, being attacked, um, more sleepwalking, and then it became more physical and verbal attacks from even those inside the home towards me. So I was dealing with a lot at a young age, and trying to understand it all was was almost impossible for a kid to grasp all that was happening. Um, and even now, I still have revelations about things that happened at a young age. So that is that was like my introduction to the supernatural. And for me, it was like me being aware that these oddities that were happening to me um, left me feeling lonely and confused. And but I also knew that no one else was experiencing it, whether it be those in the household or even some of my friends at school. Like nobody was having these experiences except for me. So I just basically lived a life of observing, observing my environment and the people in my environments, um, and just trying to piece things together. So that's all I wanted to share because there's way too much to try to fill it, put in this video. But that's how I was introduced to the supernatural and how I have been basically in this fight, in this spiritual battle since the age of 5, and it has not stopped. And, but I'm still here. So that just lets me know how protected I really am. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share. Thank you all for stopping by and listening. Hope you all have a great day. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Bye.